There. Well, welcome everyone. I'm grateful to have this time and space to do a little bit of community work with you, and I'm so grateful to the Pagan Pride creators for setting up this space where a lot of shadow work is happening today. Room 3 seems to be the room for that today. Would anyone else like to introduce yourself? We will have the opportunity to chat a little more later in the class.
Actually, I live in New York City, so I'm not from Chicago, but I was really excited to find all of these opportunities to learn more, and this one just really struck me in like what's going on now in the world with COVID and grief. It just seemed really relevant. So.
Definitely. Well, welcome. I'm glad you were able to attend. We normally we have an in-person gathering spot, but I must admit I like that this year has allowed people to make connections from further away. So I think there are going to be some very interesting new community ties being made.
Definitely, and I think it's also something like when in person was safe that I would like to see if it doesn't already exist, like replicated in New York or things like it. And I'm sure there are some, just because of the amount of people here, but I haven't looked for it. So
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you found us. We are coming up on 2:05, so I'm going to get started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some visuals. And what we are going to be doing here, it's not really like a typical class or lecture where I talk at you about a lot of facts. There will be a little bit of facts, but the work that we are presented with during this time is not necessarily work that is best addressed through the typical Western education style of, reciting facts and history. There's a lot of experience to be done, and I think a lot of things that people are experiencing right now that they're not really sure what to do with. I am, full disclosure, I'm not a therapist. I am a priestess. I have been doing this work with folks who kind of didn't have other places to go for some time. And I am still learning. I'm always learning about the best ways to talk about trauma and recovery. And one thing that I wanted to create in this workshop was a space to kind of experience some concepts and some visuals that might help to center us in some things that we don't usually get in our prevailing cultures. So I'm going to be screen sharing in just a moment. Now, the notes on this slide are mainly for me, so don't worry if they're difficult to read. I will make this slideshow available for folks who would like to hang on to this text, but the main thing for the time being is the images, and then I'm overlaying some concepts on top of these. Can everyone see the screen share all right? Heard any confirmations in the audio chat? I'm going to check the group text chat. Is everyone seeing something that says the Holy Dark and we've got a picture of a lovely campfire behind it? All right, wonderful. So the Holy Dark is a phrase that I find very compelling. Everyone is probably familiar with, in the prevailing culture, darkness is not generally associated with good things. It's thought of as something scary, And there's a reason for that, because the times that we tend to refer to as dark, or I also like to refer to them as times of collapse, because some folks have very wisely pointed out that using the word dark to refer to difficulty excessively can reinforce some racial stereotypes. So there are a few ways to think about this as a holy darkness, which isn't a bad thing. It's a fertile time. It's a time with a lot of potential for creation, or is a time of collapse, which is actually the scarier word, but it's also a word that I think we've been hearing increasingly with what's been going on with our health system, what's been going on with our economy, and our social system. So the first thing I wanted to kind of ask everyone and give everyone a heads up is that this class is a sort of spell. We will be building a container together, and it's a container for community. We are going to be building some community ties and trusting each other a little bit, discussing some of the traumas that have happened recently, because many people have lost loved ones, and there's a great deal of racial trauma going on and injustice that could be painful. I always recommend that folks have sort of a care plan for if you are going into a grief workshop or a trauma workshop. Is there something you can do to kind of comfort and ground yourself if things become overwhelming? Is there something comforting in your environment, or maybe an internal resource that you can use? Does anyone have any questions about any of that so far?
No questions.
Thank you, and the text chat looks good too. So I want to encourage us to take a few moments to scan our bodies. A body scan is a very clever somatic technique where we take a moment to check in with how our bodies are doing, see if there are any aches or pains or needs, and we can also see how they're generally feeling. So if everyone would like to take a moment to just check in with, let's start with your feet. See how the bottoms and the tops of your feet are feeling. Just move up to your ankles and your calves. See how your knees are feeling, and your thighs. See what feelings you've got in your pelvic area, in your lower belly, moving up through your diaphragm. How is your diaphragm feeling right now? Are you kind of holding in some stress breaths, or are you feeling pretty good there? And we'll move on up through our sternum, our shoulders, down from our upper arms into our lower arms, our hands and fingers. See how our necks are feeling, our faces, how are the muscles of our jaws and our foreheads. How is the top of our head feeling as we complete this circuit of our body? I'm gonna give a minute for anyone who realize they need to rearrange themselves or maybe could benefit from a glass of water to do that. All right. Is everyone good to move forward? Don't see any questions or concerns in the chat. So my next question is just, what resources do you have? When you were doing your body scan, was there anywhere in your body that felt blissful or very peaceful? If there was, there's a neat trick we can use, which is if you kind of bring your awareness to that feeling, you can actually expand it through more of your body. Bring more of that blissful groundedness to other parts of your body. I'm going to give us all a moment to do that if we would like to. We might notice that we hold more tension or stress in some places than in others while we do this. But now we have a little more power over that and a little more ability to kind of bring in the resources that we already have within us. Some other things that might look like resources when doing this sort of work is, if you can imagine as vividly as possible anything that feels safe and warm and supportive. In Lisa and Lavelle and Matthew's class, in the last section, they talked about imagining a warm, fluffy blanket to be used as a kind of sensation of safety and support. And it's always good to know who your support network is, if there's anyone that you can talk to within this group or out of it if you start feeling overwhelmed. And anything that you can eat or drink, eating protein and drinking water or warm liquids can be helpful as a sort of grounding and comforting mechanism. So if you are still feeling up for going into this spell, I would like you to take a moment to envision this lovely fire that we've been seeing in the background here. This is our village hearth fire. Since we can't have an in-person gathering this year, we've made one on the astral plane. So you're welcome to take a moment to feel into that space, the heat of the flames and the smell of wood smoke. And this is a place where you are welcome. This is a place that is made for us to have space and a space to be able to sit with some of our feelings and think about some of the things that we're all experiencing during this time. So this is a place we can belong, and a place where I'm hoping we can give each other a little bit of support as the class goes on. So we often associate the word darkness with what is hidden or perhaps a little bit dangerous. And why is that? Well, it's probably because our ancestors, way back in the day, night was a dangerous time. It's a time when a lot of the kinds of predators that might eat us were out. But it was also a time when our ancestors could hunt for food to nourish their families. So it's a time of a little bit of danger, a little bit of stress, but also a time of great potential. A time when we can really so change. And many people have been talking about this in spiritual and secular media, how the disruptions caused by the pandemic, caused by the uprising, and all manner of other things are in a big way opportunities for change. They are an opening in which, if we are able to remain conscious and work together, we really have a great opportunity to create something that has not existed before, or to bring big changes to the way that our society does things. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about that so far? All right. So we are sitting around our village hearth fire in the dark of night, and the dark is also a fertile dark. It's the darkness under the soil. It's the darkness of the fields after they are burned, which is actually a tremendous way of restoring fertility to the soil. When the old growth that perhaps is no longer thriving or serving us is broken down, what's left is the raw materials from which to build something new. And we're going to do an exercise later where we look at creating some seeds that we can plant to bring what we feel we are meant to bring and what we would like to see more of into the new world that comes out on the other side of this wildfire. So darkness, often a negative connotation, but also very much a place of creation. Just because it's a little bit frightening doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually quite essential to the continued cycle of life. And another way to think about it is a time of contraction. And I'm going to use this term a little bit because I don't want to reinforce any prejudices surrounding perhaps dark skin, which I know a lot of people feel even now. I speak to people quite regularly who are feeling that even within their family, perhaps they do not feel great about the color of their skin. That's not something that we're trying to reinforce at all. So I also want to invoke the image of the supernova that has to contract and collapse before it is able to create. You might have heard Carl Sagan telling us that we are made of stardust, and this is in fact true. It is also the case that the way that stardust gets to us is that the old star collapses. It collapses with such force that the heavier elements, the carbon and oxygen and nitrogen that are forged in its core, are spread out throughout the universe and can then be turned into new things like us. So there's another metaphor there that perhaps instead of a time of expansion and new growth, sometimes we need to undergo times of contraction, times when what is no longer serving us falls away. And this isn't always a pleasant or easy process. You know, I think we've all had those relationships or job titles or what have you, or entire political systems in our case, that were no longer really good for us, but giving them up was uncomfortable. So we can also think of this time as a time of violent contraction, but it will be followed, as these times always are, with a time of rapid creation. And those of us who are able to stay mindful and really carry the seeds that we want to plant will have the opportunity to do that. Anyone have any thoughts, questions so far? Alrighty. One more parallel I wanted to draw was the Tower card of the Tarot, which those of you who read tarot, as many pagans do, may be familiar with. It is traditionally the card that nobody wants to see, because what it means is that the old order, so to speak, is no longer working, and it is no longer working to the point that it is about to catastrophically collapse. And a funny story, in March of 2020, I did a tarot reading. I do one of these quarterly for myself, and one of the cards in the reading refers to the state of the greater outside world. Now, I got the Tower in this slot in March of 2020, and I remember thinking to myself, that's an odd card to be there, especially since I'm not seeing acute crisis in my personal or family life. I wonder what could cause the entire outside world to undergo a sort of implosion. And then the next 3 months happened. Um, so the tower, this is definitely a tower moment and a card I will pay more attention to if it comes up in that place in my deck in the future. So this is a card of collapse, a card of contraction and rapid change, which is something that our society doesn't like very much. But it's also a card that clears out unjust laws, toxic relationships, old debts, and old shackles. So, rebirth, as we learn from the mythos, is never precisely pleasant, and that's one more image I want to bring to mind here, which is the story of Ragnarok. Now, one of my primary patrons is from the North Pantheon, and I have worked a lot with heathens, and the topic of Ragnarok is a very interesting topic in heathen circles because some see it as bad. It's the apocalypse, it's the end of the world, it's something that we're supposed to try to delay and prevent. But for others, it's a time of rebirth. It's a time when a lot of the damage that this world started with is kind of wiped away, along with a lot of other things, and a new type of human and a new pantheon of gods is given the chance to grow. And the hope is that this will be a better world. There are some promising signs. So this is another great metaphor from pagan thought that I wanted to bring in. It's the Ragnarok story has some interesting commonalities with the Christian apocalypse story, except that in Ragnarok a new world is created. In the Christian apocalypse story, that's kind of the end. And then God comes and things change entirely. So the pagan worldview is very different in terms of its cycles and in terms of the idea of balance, because what the Abrahamic faith sometimes try to do is pursue the light. And their view is that if you are doing something in the correct God's name, if you are doing something according to the laws of what is good, you cannot possibly go wrong. And as we've seen, that view has gone wrong quite a lot, actually. So the pagan worldview is more about balance of the dark and light, of expansion and contraction, and that is necessary to, keep it all going and to create new life. And this is just a visual I wanted to share. Perhaps I should have shared a warning of illustrated nudity, but this is a old illustration of Ragnarok, and you can see that the gods are at war here, and you can also see that, interestingly, time is painted as a circle, so we can be confident that a new cycle will start again when the dust settles and the soil is fertile with ashes. So now I want to enter us into this exercise about seeds. Can everyone just check in still hear and see me okay?
We still see you. And
Wonderful, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful.
I did have a question.
Yes, please.
Yes, no. What does the birth of a new pantheon look like? Because is that
Yeah.
with the existence of how we are now? Or does it not look like us at all? Like it is the end of the human race, a new start, beginning kind of thing?
So that is a fascinating question. If you ask people in general, what does the start of a new world look like, you'll get a lot of different answers. In Ragnarok, interestingly, it is explicit that a couple of humans do survive Ragnarok, and a couple of gods who are the younger generation of gods. I've heard a very interesting interpretation that they are the children of the old gods who are perhaps, we hope, starting from a better place because they have been taught by their parents and their parents' mistakes. So in the heathen Ragnarok that we have specifically, we have a new world rising from the waters, and it is indeed populated by the survivors of Ragnarok, both human and divine. From a historical perspective, the growth and change of pantheons is also very interesting because there is a strong sense in the circles that study and work with gods, in my opinion, that gods don't work exactly the way humans do, that they do have children, but they are also able to kind of merge and split and grow in ways that we can't, which creates a lot of these dynamic pantheons that we see addressing different circumstances all over the world. So that's another kind of take on the historical study of how pantheons grow within the cycles of creation that we have recorded as well. Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, there are a lot of very interesting meta questions around collapse. I personally think humanity is pretty tough, and I don't expect us to go extinct anytime soon. But then there's this other very interesting question of what is us, because we are genetically related to all of the plants and the animals that might evolve into new species as well. So one thing that I deal with in my work is kind of this animistic expansion of what is our tribe. Do we include all of the elements of our ecosystem that allows us to function? And what does that mean for our economy if we have to, perhaps a wonderful phrase I heard recently was presencing the personhood of plants and animals and landforms. And I think with climate change being what it is today, of us can agree that that would be something that would be good for us to do more of. So our exercise for right now is I want you to create an image of a seed in your mind and think about the weight and the texture and the temperature of it in your hand. Are your seeds rough or smooth? Are they warm or a kind of soothing cool to the touch? And these are going to be your magical seeds that you can plant in any future situation that you want to. And what I would like us to think about is what we would like to bring forward and plant in the times to come and in our daily lives right now. What are some of the best things that we would like to see more of? Some of the best experiences in our lives that we would like to create more of for ourselves and others? What are some of the best lessons or skills that we've learned that we would like to teach others and continue to refine ourselves? What are some of the things that we wish could be that perhaps didn't get to be in this cycle of creation so far, that we would like to be able to plant and create in this fertile soil that is opening up as so much of the old growth is cleared away in this painful and sometimes scary process, but also, as every gardener knows, a necessary process to allow new things to grow. And the question is just, are we going to mindfully and choicefully plant the seeds that we want to see grow, or are we going to let whatever seeds fall into the soil? So this is where I want us to think about the color of your seeds, the feel of them, the weight of them, the texture. I'm going to give us a little visual on this next page to let us meditate on this for a moment. These are some seeds that I thought were very pretty. They're flower seeds. And so I just really want us to spend a few minutes constructing our seeds. We have this satchel of seeds to carry within us. We can have one or two or three or four different kinds of seeds, but what we're going to put into each type of seed is the feeling that we want to be able to invoke in the future, the feeling that we want to be able to spread to others to the best of our ability, the activity or the concept that we want to pass along, and really envision this new world will be coming out on the other side of all of this chaos as sorry about our little flicker there. Really envision this as a garden where those of us who are present are going to be able to mindfully create anew and heartfully create anew. We're going to be able to use our emotions and our deepest instincts and the knowledge in our bodies to plant the seeds that we want to see grow into the fruits and the flowers and the trees of our future. So I'm going to leave us with this image to meditate on for just a couple more minutes. All right, how is everybody feeling? Wonderful. All right, now I'm going to move us forward. Now that you've got your seeds tucked away in your satchel, you can recall them at any time. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about the power of grief, because now that we have our resources and our kind of perspective on the rebirth and the passing away of a lot of people and things and perhaps ideas that we held dear during this time. It's not an easy thing, and it's easy for people to commit what is called spiritual bypassing, which is where you kind of say, well, it's not that bad, cheer up, don't worry about it, um, because it's all going to be okay, it's all worth it in the end, what have you. And the problem with spiritual bypassing is that the only way to really process and harvest the benefits of the old and of what is going on with us right now is to experience these emotions of grief, of anger. And I wanted to talk about grief especially because I think our society skews very heavily toward anger. And there's definitely a time and a place for righteous anger, but at the bottom of that is our society telling us that grief is a sign of weakness, of vulnerability. And that is actually a very new and non-traditional idea. If you look at a lot of the heroic epics of old, the works of Homer, the Epic of Gilgamesh, what you see is that the ability to feel grief and sorrow is actually valorized. It is a trait of great heroes, and it is a way of showing those heroes moral strength and the beauty of the world that they live in. Because when you have Gilgamesh or Achilles weeping, what you have is expression of the bond that has been lost. And we know that in order for change to continue occurring, some things do need to pass away, but we don't want to bypass that All right. Do I have audio? Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. Is anyone who is listening having trouble hearing me, seeing me, anything like that? Okay, wonderful. Um, so my next question is, what was the last thing you folks heard so I can start up where I got cut off?
The stream closed, so can you bring that up again?
Yeah.
Where we were?
And here's a question. Were we still looking at the seeds, or did you catch the transition to some perspectives on grief?
We caught some of the transition, I think, to the next one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's Murphy's Law, right? It's the day you're presenting that your internet goes a little derpy. All right. So for the sections to come, I just do want to share a few historical and neurological facts about grief, and then I'd like to give us the opportunity to share a little bit together, because I know that a lot of us are grieving losses of some sort or another. This is definitely a time of rapid change, and one of the best things we can actually give each other is just community. I know it's very easy to feel like there's nothing you can do, but the truth is one of the best things that people can do is just hold space for each other and give each other a community to belong to. Our brains know that we depend upon community and belonging just as much as we depend upon oxygen and water. So I'm going to try to give us some space to do a little bit of that at the end of this session. These are some wonderful, wonderful quotes that have come to my attention that I think really bring home why grief isn't necessarily something to be set aside or hidden. It certainly can be safe to perhaps delay it if you're not in a space where you can, excuse me, where you can process grief in a positive way. It can make sense to keep it private if you're not with a community that will respond in a supportive way, but it's not necessarily something to just wish away. So here are some of these lovely quotes by very wise people. Grief means you are excellent at loving. We need to grieve the ones we've lost, not to sustain our connection to suffering, but to sustain our connection to love. And then Dr. Gail Gross's lovely quote, "The only way out of grief is through, and the only way through is together." I'm going to take a moment to check the Discord, make sure I'm still all connected. Okay, looks like we're good. And one thing I wanted to touch on is that my first career was actually in neuroscience and clinical research. So I've taken a very interesting path of realizing that perhaps the clinical world wasn't able to solve all of the problems that our society is facing, and that a different perspective is also needed. From a clinical perspective, tears literally get the sad out. When we cry, our tears contain chemicals that send unseen signals. They can evacuate some of the neurotransmitters that can cause painful emotions, and they also will actually send out a chemical distress call telling others that we need support. And there have been some fascinating studies done with seeing how tears can kind of change the way that others view a situation. And that's one of the reasons for the original title of this workshop, which was The Power of Public Grief, because I, for one, have been in conversations where perhaps another party was not listening to me at all until I started crying. And then it's like this sudden flip switches, and they're like, wait a minute, what's going on? What am I missing in this situation? Unfortunately, that we can't always rely on that to happen. Increasingly, I'm seeing a unfortunate indifference to the power of tears on the political extremes, but it's the way it is designed to work is to actually bond us and get us support. Um, and we need to move through these emotions in order to process them properly. So whether that happens as soon as an event happens or 10 or 20 years later, eventually the healing will take place when we move through those emotions. And if it's not happening for you right now with a given loss or trauma, that's okay. Sometimes I've had situations in my life where I would not have been able to deal with a grief in a productive way until maybe 5 or 10 years after the original situation actually occurred. So that's okay if it's not happening for you right now, but if it is, it's not necessarily something to want to, speed through or not experience. And one thing that is very interesting is that the epic writers of old seemed to realize this. They seem to realize that when we grieve, we are able to communicate in new ways and we are able to feel in new ways. We are able to feel the value of certain things. We are able to empathize with each other more. And this shows up in some very interesting ways in the works of Homer, actually. The Greek heroic epics, as well as the Sumerian heroic epics, portray the great heroes as one of the ways of showing their valor and virtue is that they weep. And before crying, they are often paralyzed. They feel in despair. They don't feel like there's anything they can do. But after crying, they are surrounded by serenity, in one of Homer's words, and they sort of see the new path that is open to them. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about any of this so far? All right. So I just wanted to share a few of those thoughts, and then I'm returning us to the weaving the spell of community slide, because we are a small group today and we have a relatively small amount of time, but I did want to give us the opportunity to create space and hold space for each other in sitting with some of these difficult emotions. I know a lot of us have been operating very much in isolation with social distancing, and our society doesn't really have a built-in space to do this work. Churches do this work, but if you're not able to abide by, or perhaps if you question the wisdom of the Abrahamic scriptures, there aren't a lot of places to do this. So I wanted to just create some of this space now, and I will be at the end of this presentation providing folks with a way to stay in touch through my mailing list. And we may be having future Zoom events and workshops and services of that type. So I will share that at the end, but for now, let's take a moment to see how you're feeling. And no one needs to share anything they're uncomfortable with. You're welcome to stay silent or pass. I know you may have been on Zoom for 4 or 5 hours today already. I have some things I can share that I hope might help folks to feel a little bit less alone in their own grief, but you also are welcome to share in the moments to come if there is any grief or concern or anything that you'd like to just be held in the community and form some of those bonds with. And the other question that I'm going to ask is, we are dealing with the loss of things that have changed, things or even people that maybe are no longer around, but we're also looking at fertile soil, and I want us to think about how we can help you in this community of the moment to plant some of the seeds you would like to plant. If there's any way that we can hold space for you or be there for you, because this is work that we're so accustomed to working alone, especially if we are members of a minority religion or spirituality, and especially during social distancing. I want us to be a little bit more there for each other during this next, I think we have about half an hour before I will clear out to let the next instructor get ready for his workshop. So this is an opportunity to do a round of toasts and tell some stories. If there is anything or anyone we would like to share with the group and spread the seeds of our experiences with them or what they did for us. And I'm going to end screen share now. Let me just make sure we don't have too many people, because if I return to video and we have more than 25 people, folks will get kicked. All right, I think we are okay. I think we can accommodate going back to video. And you folks are welcome to leave your cameras on or off, whatever is comfortable for you on this day of lots of Zooming. Does anyone have any more questions or comments that they want to share as we wrap up the PowerPoint? Hello, I see we have a new friend via video.
I think for me, I worry about not having the space for a collective grief, as a country, as just people, on this planet that are all going through something that is very stressful in many different ways, regardless if you've personally lost someone. I feel like having an avenue to release that, right? Like in all of these stories, you see that having that release is cathartic. It's good for you. You don't hold it in. I don't know what happens when you bottle it up.
Yeah, this is very true, and it's I feel like it's difficult as well because things that just go out into the internet ether so often get politicized these days, and that's a real problem as well. So I'm very grateful for this event because it creates some space for pagans to be together in community, and one of my goals is to keep creating more spaces like that because we do have a lot on our plates right now, and if we can't, bring that together, uh, it's certainly not going to help unite us. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Well, I'm grateful to all of you for coming, and I hope this space is able to support you in some way. I want to bring up a grief that I've been having that might seem odd, but I think it's one that a lot of people are feeling and perhaps don't hear expressed or articulated very often, which is I grew up with a forest. My parents lived in a neighborhood, but near that neighborhood, there was a stretch of land where no one wanted to develop the forest that lived there. And it would be accurate to say that for a lot of my childhood, that forest was my best friend. I sensed very strongly the presence of the plants and animals and the land there, and I spent a great deal of time there. And one of the griefs that I'm feeling is that I know that it's likely that if the construction boom in my hometown continues, someday I'm going to go back there and that forest won't be there. And I've already seen many, many forests and fields being replaced by strip malls and apartment complexes. And when I speak to people about this, I hear many people say that they've had similar experiences, but it's not something that we are taught in our culture to grieve public spaces or natural landforms. So I just really want to give voice to that because we all know now that there are acute scientific and logical reasons why we need to protect those spaces, but I think many of us also feel a sort of emotional kinship with them that we just aren't given the opportunity to voice because it doesn't exist in our cultural lexicon. So I wanted to give a moment of space and a toast to all of those lands which I am working to try to find a way to save, but there are a lot of battles that are going to be lost. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? And is my video still working? Because I just caught a bit of lag on the server here. Okay, I think we're good. Well, the last time I gave a similar presentation, I was only given 1 hour, so I only designed enough lecture material for that amount of time, but I'm happy to stay here to talk and hold space because we have this time to be together. And maybe some of us could use a little breather as well, because I know there's a whole other round of Zoom calls coming up at 4, and I am excited for Jason and Lilith's call, which is going to be a little more informed by anti-racist work than I am. I am a novice in that work. That's one more thing that wasn't really a thing in the culture I grew up in, so I appreciate their skills a lot. I appreciate all of you for being here. And I will hang out in case anyone else wants to talk and share anything that they might be grieving or wanting to be held in. And oh, I will also the link to where you can sign up for my mailing list in the text chat. I'm such a bad capitalist. I'm like, that's the first thing you're supposed to do if you're like building a website is get people on your mailing list. But I'm like, oh right, that's a thing. That's like not one of my first impulses, but mailing lists are especially useful during this time of lack of in real life public spaces. Here
So
we are.
I think I'm gonna leave, but I really appreciated the talk and the space, and it was really informative, and I will sign up for your mailing list. So thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming, everyone. Let's see. See, we have a number of people still on the channel. If anyone would like to bring anything to the group, you're welcome to. And I'm going to toast everyone who is here because it's important, I think, that we make this kind of community space. So here's to you. Also, here's to having enough space for the rest of the afternoon, because I must admit this does feel a little bit different from the in real life space. It's a lot of Zoom.
What?
And if anyone's still listening in, if you do wish to receive the PowerPoint that we used today, I will send that out to the folks who sign up for my mailing list as well. And I promise I won't spam you. I am not what one would call over
Can you hear me? Does any Hello?
And Queen Urzuli, it looks to me like you're not muted in the chat. So there's nothing I can do to unmute you there.
Ooh.
Is anyone else having trouble with being heard when you speak or with hearing me? Thank you, Lori.
Hello?
Well, let's see. If no one else has anything they'd like to share, hello, Papa Culture. Good to see you. If no one else has anything they'd like to share on this channel, it looks like the next workshop the Papa Culture folks are potentially ready to start setting up. So I might call the end to the session early and leave the room for them. Is there any other burning questions, comments, concerns anyone has? I'm in the text channel as well as the audio channel, if so. And folks who are still here, it sounds like at least one person is having an issue where we're unable to hear their audio. So I'm going to suggest that we move discussion to the text channel because I think I've done everything I can do to try to fix that on my end. But goodness knows technology can be interesting. I had to reinstall my audio drivers like yesterday because my microphone wasn't registering. All right. I'm hearing from Queen Erzuli that she wants to share grief around how the distancing has changed the lives of their school-age children. School is entirely remote where they are, and they have one middle school student and two high school students who are clearly suffering. And I definitely hear that. That's a real dilemma for a lot of us, for kids of those ages to be isolated like this for this long. I hold space for that. And Queen Azuli says they do understand the need and the safety for all of us, but it is painful, and that's true of a lot of things during this pandemic. It's been an interesting time for me because the social distancing has forced me to start doing some things that I was not previously able to do because it was very difficult and inconvenient and uncomfortable. I'm hoping that some of these skills and disciplines I've had to develop will serve me in the future, but it's definitely been, I can't honestly say I would be in a better situation if this hadn't happened. So take the skills developed in crisis where we can, and but it's a lot of time to lose, especially for someone of that age. I know. I'm old enough that I'm like a year. I mean, I've been through a lot of years, but if I had been in middle school at the time, I can't imagine. And if anyone else is experiencing trouble with their audio, you're welcome to share in the text channel. I wish I knew why some folks are not being heard, because that does add an extra dimension of togetherness, but
Testing.
let me take a look at unmuting. It looks to me like one of the people who couldn't speak was unmuted. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to manually unmute everyone as far as I'm able in case that is a thing. But Queen Arzuli is showing up to me as being unmuted already. And yeah, it looks like these mutes I'm seeing are not mutes that I can undo. They are coming through as mutes that are on the user end if they're still there.
Well, even though no one can hear me, I've really enjoyed this.
You can try, Lori. I believe I have moderator powers, and they're not showing up as muted to me, but I'd certainly welcome it if you think you might be able to poke at it.
I can hear you, Lorena.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, I can hear me now too. Oh, good. Thanks, Jason.
You're very quiet for me. I can hear you now as well, though.
Yes, I think something's going on with my microphone.
Huh. Well.
But at least it's on now. Low is better than nothing.
Well, I'm glad we're able to hear your voice for a moment. All right, and welcome. Is that Jason?
Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I just wanted to stop by and see how everything's doing.
Yeah, definitely. We're just having an open space to share anything that we might be grieving and maybe want some space held for during this interesting time. Unfortunately, that coincided with some audio issues, so we've been using the text channel as well. But if you or your co-presenter have anything you'd like to share, you're welcome to join us in that. All right. Oh, I'm getting some interesting feedback now. Okay.
This is definitely different.
Yeah, I heard that. I did hear that. That was good. Yeah, it's a very unique time. I kind of had started to get to that point in my life where I felt like I'd seen everything, but then it was like, nope, we
Right?
got more things.
So many adjustments.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I've been fortunate because I've been working from home for a long time, but I can only imagine if I,
Me too. I see so
yeah,
many of my friends struggling, and I'm like, I am like always home anyway. Like
yeah,
that's just where I'm at all the time. So to see so many people trying to adjust, and I'm just like, it's business as usual, while the
yeah.
contrast is just, it's out of this world.
Oh gosh, I can only imagine. I'm living with a few folks who are still being asked and allowed to go to their jobs, so it hasn't been that big of a shift in our household, but just the number of things that I would be doing that I'm not because of social
Yeah,
distancing is
right.
it's a lot.
Summer was, it was different. It was, I do a lot in the summer, like that's busy time for me. But this year was like not busy.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but it was like good for doing things that I had never had time to do. I
yeah,
picked up a bunch of different like hobbies, things I had wanted to do so bad, but didn't feel like I had the time to learn these things.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I did that. So I don't feel like it was like a waste or anything. It just kind of awakens a different part of us,
yeah,
that
definitely.
like when you there's nothing else to do except, you know, go within and see what's happening. What can you bring out that needs to come out? Because now's the
Exactly.
time for that.
Exactly, if there's ever been an opportunity.
Yeah.
That's sort of the ironic thing about how we're, moving towards the dark of the year, um, which usually would be the time where we would go more internal, but that's what this entire year has been. So it's
The whole year, yeah.
really thrown out the pagan cycles.
And we got a Fimble winter going on here.
For me, the biggest thing was just the loss of festivals,
Mm-hmm.
where I spend
Right.
most of my summers.
And like I travel down south and to the West Coast a few times a year. Haven't been able to do that. So
Yeah,
it's strange
it
not
is.
having the freedom like to do the things that you want to do and that you need to do and that you're supposed to do, but you can't do those things and you have to find new ways. It can be aggravating, but
Yeah, yeah,
what
it's very interesting. I had been kind of heavily relying on community spaces for parts of my spiritual practice, and now, none of those communities are meeting in person, so it's been an interesting thing to adjust and see, how much can we do via Zoom, how much can we do on our own. But I'll come out more skilled at quite a few things because of that, but
I live in this state that pretty much it didn't really shut down very much. I live in Indiana.
oh, that's nice.
So like even in the thick of things, like Michigan is close to us and they lock down very strict.
Mm-hmm.
Like they people really couldn't even leave their house. Okay, it was
Mhm.
bad. And meanwhile, here it's like, yay, nothing is closed, everything is fine. So then Indiana started putting up billboards in Michigan talking about, hey, you want to shop? You want to hang out? Come
Oh
to
boy.
Indiana. We're open.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, it's just so weird. Okay. Like,
Yeah.
I don't,
There.
I'm just observing these changes. Like, that is surreal. Okay. I, I, and then this plot to like abduct the governor.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. This is not political in the least. This is just about how people with cabin fever like wig out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I.
Well, I hate to say it, but Michigan is my home state, and I was very angry to hear about that plot, but I was also 0% surprised because there's a very strong anti-government current in Michigan that has been there like since I was in college. A lesser version of a plot to disable a small town's police department was discovered by similar people when I was in college up there. And so I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, it's something we got to take a hard look at because there are these folks that feel like if it's not their way, it's not the right way to a worrying degree.
Well, did you hear? They're not domestic terrorists. They may have been trying to do a legal citizen's arrest.
Oh Lord. Oh
Like, I
Lord.
just wanted to like lay down on the ground and just like cover myself with a blanket and like never see the world again because how could he
Yeah.
say that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I
so ridiculous. There is absolutely not even an ounce of common sense behind that statement.
Well,
It was
I don't know who
it was
said that. I don't think
it
Trump
was
said that,
some
but it was.
sheriff or something. No, it was like a law enforcement dude.
Yeah.
Oh God. Oh God, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Well,
He was a law enforcement guy. And I'm just
yeah,
like, what is he talking about? What? Yeah.
there are a lot of things to prepare for, that's for sure, because I'm one of those people who people will tell things that they would not say in public.
Of course.
And so there are folks who I've been like, we should be concerned about this
Yeah.
for a while. And it's always like, I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting century, that's for sure.
Ooh, yes, interesting. I love interesting though. I as weird and crazy, I am still grateful to be a
Yeah.
witness in this
Yeah.
time in human evolution because this shit is crazy. Okay. And
Yeah.
you need to believe
True.
it. Otherwise, like this can't possibly be happening. If you're like reading this in a book, this is fake. This is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Like this is real life right now. So,
I remember being in history classes in middle school and high school and reading about the early 20th century and the stuff that happened then and being like, there's no way that would happen. This is a plot hole. And now I'm like, yep, okay.
yeah.
I still don't understand it, but I believe it now. Well,
I don't know what kind of universe you're living
Okay.
alrighty. Well, it sounds like Jason, are you folks getting ready to set up?
I don't know. I mean, there's no rush.
Alrighty.
I was gonna test my camera to see.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Hello. Oh my goodness, kitty.
Oh, kitty cat. Oh, so cute.
Let's see here. All right. Yeah, because I was having all kinds of problems yesterday with video glitching and audio going in and out, and Lilith was even worse. So we kind of have a backup plan to go to Zoom if we have to.
Oh, smart, smart.
It looks good now though, so hopefully.
Yeah.
I came upstairs because they finally ended the construction for the day.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Because like all the loud beeping and
Yeah.
and this is a little bit more, I don't know,
It's a lovely room.
pagany than my basement. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's more like musician-y.
Definitely.
So how did your how did everything go?
I think it went well. Last time I gave this talk, I ended up putting together like 2 hours worth of material. So this time I shot on the low side and we finished a little bit early, but we got to have some nice talks, and I was very pleased to hear that there were some folks who were able to attend from afar because of the online format. So I'm glad they had a place to go.
Cool.
Yeah.
How you doing, Lorena?
Doing good. Can't complain.
Are you gonna stick around for our workshop?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be doing that as well.
Cool, because yeah, we're also because we're trying to figure out like without any kind of interaction.
Let me see it. Spread it
What?
out. Here, spread it out. Let me see.
Oh
Really
God,
young.
it's still wet.
Come on, before people get here. Yeah, I know. I'm so bossy. Sorry.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, like without any kind of like immediate interaction, we're kind of like we're gonna try to figure out like how many people have actually seen these shows, and you know, are you up to date in your Lovecraft Country viewing?
Oh gosh.
That show is amazing.
Because there's gonna be spoilers.
Ooh.
It is so good. It's good. Yeah, I'm up.
We're gonna have spoilers. We're gonna have all kinds of. I don't know. I'm gonna try to do I don't know if anyone's tried to do this yet, but I'm gonna try to do some screen sharing to show some clips.
Yes, I did screen sharing. It seemed to work pretty well, except that I kept somehow accidentally flipping between slides, but that was kept to a minimum.
You had a PowerPoint?
I used Google Slides, although I still call it PowerPoint because I am a millennial, not a Zoomer.
Wow, you're a millennial. You're ancient.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm starting to get there. I'm starting to be like, I don't know how to help you troubleshoot this, but I feel like I should.
Yeah, I decided to get not to get super fancy and do a PowerPoint because I'm like, we're just gonna be shooting the shit anyway. But yeah, I'm like crossing my fingers because yeah, Lilith had a lot of trouble with her connection the last couple of days, and she couldn't really do it on her computer, and she was doing it on her phone, and that worked for a little while, but then it crashed her phone. So
Well, will she at least be able to do like a voice just in case she can't do video?
yeah, well, we're gonna try a bunch of different things. I mean, I was also very conscious of the fact that like I didn't want to like be doing this workshop where we're talking about race and just like have the white face be the what everybody sees. So
Well, I think I'm gonna pop
I mean, she's
out and
still
grab a
there.
snack before your workshop starts.
okay.
I will be back.